I'm joined by a very special guest. Professor Bernard Haykel from the University of Princeton in the United States is in Riyadh at the moment. He's one of the world's leading authorities on the West Asian region. Appreciate your joining us, Professor Haykel. How do you see the events playing out now? Do you see this as brewing into an unprecedented conflict that could get bloodier and longer now?
So first, hello, and thank you for having me. I don't think it's unprecedented. I mean, there's been several, wars between Hamas and Israel over, more than a decade. But the intensity and the ferocity of the attack is certainly unprecedented. The entry of Hamas into Israel proper and the killing of over 1,000 Israelis and the brutal murder of over 1,000 Israelis and and there's several thousand also injured. That's unprecedented. The complete breakdown in Israeli intelligence and military capability in blocking this invasion across the border is also unprecedented. And now what we're seeing is an Israeli reaction to this attack, and they're basically, from the latest news reports, they're flattening Gaza. And, many tens of thousands of people will die as a result of this. And it seems also that the Israelis don't care about the hostages, which is something they used to care about a lot before. At the moment, they've given up, I think, on the hostages, and they just want to destroy Hamas. In the process, of course, many, many thousands of Palestinians will suffer and die, just like many thousands of Israelis have already.
But do you see, Professor Haykel, Hamas being destroyed, just as Hamas's aim to destroy the Israeli state has never worked? Do you think Israel now will retaliate in a manner that Hamas is finished?
Well, if the Israelis reoccupy Gaza, which they left in 2005, if they reoccupy that strip of land, then yes, Hamas will be destroyed, and they will be, any survivors will live in exile, as some of them do now in Turkey and in Qatar. But essentially, it depends on how far the Israelis want to take the invasion and whether they want to reoccupy the Gaza Strip, which, as I said, they left in 2005.
But do you see Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu being pushed now into a position where he has no option but to strike and strike hard, because what has happened in Israel has actually weakened his political authority? He's facing a lot of criticism for the security intelligence failures. Will Netanyahu now, has he been left with no option but to go in for a ground military offensive in Gaza?
Well, I definitely think that this attack by Hamas on Israel spells the end of Prime Minister Netanyahu's political career. I can't see him surviving the consequences of this attack. But for now, Israel is at war. And as long as it is at war, he is the leader of the country. And he will try to also aim to resuscitate his reputation by destroying Gaza and Hamas. So I think we're in completely uncharted territories. I think the gloves are off. I think the Israelis now are in a completely different mental state of mind because of the size of this disaster that they've faced. This failure and defeat. I mean, Israel has been defeated by a ragtag army of men with pickup trucks and guns and grenades. And so they have to reestablish deterrence. And to do that, they will need to be extremely violent. I personally think that's, in the long term, a mistake. I think that, the Palestinian question will never be resolved until the Palestinians have a state. But that's far from being on the agenda of the Israeli political leadership at the moment.
I saw an interesting article you wrote, Professor Haykel, 2 days ago. You said this was Hamas's way of establishing their superiority in the Palestinian region over moderate Palestinian national authorities, both in Gaza and particularly also now possibly in the future in West Bank. Do you think that will happen, that Hamas, at least on the Arab street or among the ordinary Palestinian, will be seen as heroes for taking on Israel in this manner, even as the Western world sees them as rank terrorists?
No, 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 no. Absolutely. I mean, Hamas is. I mean, I'm speaking to you from Saudi Arabia, from Riyadh, and I follow, Arabs all over the Middle East, and everyone sees Hamas as heroes, or most people. I wouldn't say everyone, but many, many people see them as heroes for what they have done. And if they survive this onslaught by Israel, they will definitely have taken over the leadership of the Palestinian cause, and not least because also the Palestinian Authority, which is the authority that is officially recognized as the head of the Palestinians, is completely corrupt and inefficient and governs very badly and has lost most of its legitimacy in the eyes of Palestinians. By the way, there's one other aspect to why this happened. It's not just Hamas trying to take over the Palestinian cause and the leadership of the Palestinian cause. I think also Iran is very much involved in this attack, and Iran wanted to do two things. First, it wanted to have a big say in the question of Palestine in order to salvage some of its reputation for having been involved in the massacres of hundreds of thousands of Syrians during the Syrian civil war, most of whom were Sunni Muslims. And the second thing that Iran wanted to accomplish was to end the process of normalization and peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. That also now has been put on hold effectively because of this war.
That is what I wanted to come to. You are in Riyadh at the moment in Saudi Arabia, and there is seen to be a kind of brewing war, ideological war, political war between the moderate Gulf states and Iran. Do you see that battle intensifying within the Islamic world, or will there now be a greater consolidation, a sense of unity with Israel being seen as the common enemy?
No, there are two kind of visions for the Middle East, or for what you call West Asia. One vision is that of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and that is a vision about progress and prosperity and economic development and peace, but with also caring about Palestinian rights. That's one vision, and then there's another vision which is led by Iran, and that's a vision of chaos and instability with the aim of destroying Israel and expelling the United States from West Asia. And that's never going to happen. I mean, Israel will never be destroyed, nor will America leave West Asia because of Iran. So what we see are two competing visions, one that thrives on instability, and the other one that thrives and wants stability. And that will continue, and what we're seeing in Israel is part of that process.
So do you see, therefore, this war possibly widening across West Asia? There is talk of Hezbollah now. There are reports of Hezbollah firing rockets from Lebanon, a possibility of a new front there being opened. Would this war, therefore, widen in its ambit, or will it be primarily limited to Gaza and possibly in the future to the West Bank?
No, I think it could definitely widen to include Lebanon. That's a decision that Iran will take because Hezbollah is basically a militia that works for Iran and is part of the Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. So if the Iranians give the order for Hezbollah to enter the war, they will. And Hezbollah has over 150,000 rockets with precision-guided rockets. So if they launch an attack on Israel, they could really devastate Israel. But the retaliation from Israel could be awesome. I mean, Israel would destroy Lebanon, and also it might bring Iran into the war. The U.S., as you probably heard, the U.S. has sent several battleships, including an aircraft carrier, to the Eastern Mediterranean. They're about to arrive in Israel actually any hour now. And that is a signal to Iran that, it should not escalate. Because should it choose to escalate, the Israelis and the Americans are effectively saying to Iran that you will be a target as well. So this could actually spiral out of control for sure.
But you see, that is the worry, isn't it? Because there's already an ongoing war in the heart of Europe, in Ukraine. There is a feeling that the Americans could, for at least now, turn their eyes off the ball in Ukraine, focus on Israel. Do you see that happening? Russia possibly playing a role. They've come out with a statement in a way, some see it as supporting Palestine, China playing a role. Are we seeing a wider power game out here, or will it be confined to Israel versus Hamas?
Yeah, I mean, I think what will probably happen will be we will see several weeks, maybe months of Israel destroying basically all of Gaza. and the Americans trying to contain. I don't think this can spread to involve Russia or China. The specific issue with Ukraine is the following: it has to do with arms and weapons shipments. Essentially, America is depleted. All its production has been going to the Ukraine, and if the Israelis now want also more weapons from the United States, America will have to choose between Ukraine and Israel, and so the real implication is whether they have sufficient weaponry for waging these battles or these wars in two different theaters of operation. I don't think, though, the Americans will get involved directly in the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, because Israel doesn't need America's help. Military help. It needs military equipment and weapons, but not American soldiers. And then if it widens more broadly to Lebanon, Israel can handle that as well. If it includes Iran, though, that's a whole other story. Then America would probably become involved.
But where does all this leave the core Palestinian cause? Do you believe that's completely now pushed into the distance? Any hope of a peaceful resolution and a two-state solution?
I think it has been pushed further back into the distance, unfortunately. I don't know how Hamas thought that they could, gain anything from this attack. So I don't see the Palestinian issue, unfortunately, being resolved at all, unless something dramatically changes in Israel, because you have to get the Israelis to agree. And at the moment, the Israelis are even more far to the right than they are to the center as a result of these attacks.
Can I therefore ask you in conclusion, an Indian perspective, in your view, how should India see what's playing out in West Asia? India has, of course, interests in terms of oil prices, and the concerns that we will have of a permanently destabilized region doesn't help us. Should India be seen, according to you, to take firm sides in this battle taking place between Israel and Hamas?
I mean, look, it depends on how devastating the images are of the destruction of Gaza. So, if you have tens or hundreds of thousands of dead people, it's going to become very difficult, not just for India, but for all countries around the world, to have to decide whether they should condemn Israel for its action or overreaction, let's say. I think oil is only an issue if Iran is directly involved in the attack in some way or in the war. But Saudi Arabia has lots of spare capacity. It can produce a lot of oil to make up for any loss of Iranian oil, for example. So I think India, at the moment, as far as I understand, the Prime Minister of India has shown great support for Israel because of the tragic and horrific events there. And I think India's interests are principally with Saudi Arabia and the UAE and the Gulf states, not so much with the axis of resistance and instability that is with Iran and in Syria and Yemen. So I think India's okay. India will be able to stay on the side of the Saudis, and I don't think you'll be affected by this.
Net, in an area that you've written about, covered extensively, do you see this now to be a tipping point for another spell of destabilization, of explosions from time to time? And will Palestine remain fundamental in a way to this part of the world?
Yes, I think that as long as the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is not resolved, you will have repeated episodes of instability and war and violence. I also think that Iran is a major source of instability in the region. It has all these non-state actors, these militias in Yemen and Lebanon, now in Palestine, as well as in Iraq, and it uses them to destabilize these societies. So I think that both the Iranian regime and the lack of resolution of the Palestinian conflict are both sources of deep instability in this region.
Professor Heikel, for joining me there from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and giving us a sense of the bigger picture on what lies ahead. I appreciate you joining us there.